Hello and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. This is Sophie from English Australia. I'd just like to make sure that everybody can hear me and also see the PowerPoint slide that's up on the screen. So if you can you just type in yes? Okay, wonderful. So I'm getting lots of yeses. Well, thank you everyone for coming. And I'd like to introduce today's webinar presenters, Paula Dimmell and Sandra Caon-Parsons. And Paula and Sandra work at the University of Adelaide's English Language Centre. Paula's the Education Program Manager for TESOL there, and Sandra is an Education Advisor at the English Language Centre. They've presented on their Intercultural Competency program, which they designed for the university at the English Australia Conference last year and also at the UAPD Fest in Sydney. And last year, their expertise in this area was recognised by English Australia when they won the award for contribution to professional practice for their paper entitled Creating Opportunities for Students to Connect in a Global Context. So thank you very much for presenting the webinar for our members today, Sandra and Paula.
Hello. It's Sandra here. Thank you. I'd also like to say thank you very much for attending this afternoon. I understand how busy people are. Both Paula and I have extensive experience working in cross-cultural environments, both here in Australia and internationally. And these sort of mutual interests brought us together. And from very informal discussions, we've created this structured program and designed this intercultural competency program. So what started as a small idea, I suppose a bit of a what I call a discussion, has evolved into a program which has been integrated into all courses at the ELC.
I'd just like to say hello now. This is Paula. Sandra and I will be sharing the presentation, and more than happy to take questions at the end of the presentation. If you'd like to type your questions in as we go or make a note of them, then I think Sophie will collate them at the end and give them to us, and hopefully we can respond as best we can.
Okay, we'll just change slide. So our intercultural competency program, which we put together, will often refer to as the ICC, is a structured program that's been developed at the University of Adelaide's English Language Centre, mainly to create opportunities for students to connect in a global context. So this standalone and easily transferable program aims to create meaningful opportunities for mixed ability learners, so they don't all have to be from one level, to come together and develop their intercultural competency skills towards becoming global citizens. Our next slide will give you an overview of today's presentation. And we feel it's quite a timely webinar, as the English Australia Conference, which is coming up in September in Adelaide, has the theme of empowering global citizens. And some of you may have submitted abstracts or are thinking of attending this conference. So this session will illustrate practical ways to create opportunities for concrete experiences in the classroom and demonstrate how this has been done at our language centre. We've got a curriculum framework. We're going to show you bring up some sample tasks, some lesson plans and data that we've collected from participants on their experiences of this program. As many of you will be aware, global citizenship has been identified as a priority across all education sectors, as well as within workplaces. There is a consensus that global citizenship is essential for 21st century learners, and global companies are recognising the benefits of culturally literate employees. But the questions are, how do we get there? and how do our students get there? So we asked our teachers and staff and students what their understanding of being a global citizen is. And the following is a representation of their responses. So you can see, the responses are someone who sees themselves as part of the world, being comfortable in different cultural environments and not judging, thinking about where we fit in on the world stage, understanding myself and others by breaking down stereotypes, taking responsibility for our actions and how they affect others, being aware of how decisions made by us affect other people in the world, someone who has an ethical care for the planet and its people, someone with a strong sense of social justice, leaving my comfort zone and what I know and learning about others, someone who feels a sense of responsibility for the worldwide community rather than just their immediate community. So there are many varied understandings and definitions of global citizenship. So we'd like you just to take a moment yourself and think about what being a global citizen means to you and why it's important. So as you can see, we had quite varied responses from our staff and students. What's your understanding of being a global citizen? So you might already have found, by just even thinking on that, defining global citizenship can be a challenging concept because a global citizen can mean many different things to different people. From our research, we decided to take a step back, and rather than focusing on defining global citizenship, we decided to consider the development of particular skills. In this case, the students' intercultural competency skills that can lead them to becoming global citizens. So what is intercultural competence? Our focus is on equipping our learners with the intercultural competency and linguistic skills needed to participate confidently both socially and professionally in global contexts. So we want to give our students the tools to develop their capacity to work within a borderless world in which there are a variety of perspectives. So this will help increase their capabilities for future studies and employability. Students have to be equipped with the knowledge, skills and values needed to embrace any sort of opportunities they come across and challenges that they're going to encounter on their journey and start to create the kind of world they want to live in. So our end aim is, we're aiming for a person with developed ICC skills can enter into new cultural settings, can be national, professional, organisational, regional, and immediately understand what's happening and why, confidently interact with people, and really importantly, engage in the right actions. And this will be because they have a skill set now to do so. While we are all working in environments with diverse students from different cultures, because I'm assuming everyone's coming from teaching English language, and we probably already include some sort of informal cross-class activities in our programs, it can sometimes just be assumed that our students will or are developing ICC skills. However, upon further research, reading that we've done and reflecting on this, it was interesting to note that it doesn't actually just happen. Many researchers confirmed that it needs to be organised and structured. So just knowledge of intercultural understanding or regular contact with other cultural groups does not necessarily lead to intercultural competence. So as the quote infers, an intentional, structured program is needed. So opportunities that support students' development as global citizens and which help them develop their intercultural competency is needed. So later in the webinar, we're going to be looking at different ways to embed this into our teaching. So from our research, we identified that effective interaction with people and career advancement incorporates more than just fluency in a language or a culture. Specific skills are needed, such as innovation, higher order cognitive skills, and sophisticated communication and collaboration skills. So take a moment to just look down this list of skills on this slide that we've got up now. These ICC skills, we decided, are fundamental for success within educational institutions, and that be universities, language centres, schools, and also workplace environments. So the preparation of graduates to be able to participate in workplaces across the globe is one of the primary aims of, for example, the Australian university sector's goal of internationalisation, further highlighting the need to prepare students to perform in a global context. So it's the development of these skills which gives students the strategies and tools to connect globally. We can't make students global citizens, but what we can do is help them develop their intercultural competency needed to become global citizens. So as teachers of English, it's our responsibility to build students' intercultural communication skills in order to prepare them to be effective speakers of English in global contexts. Students need to be able to learn with and from their diverse peers, work collaboratively and communicate effectively in groups. Intercultural competence enables them to empathise with peers of different races, religions, and of different linguistic and social origins. But it should also be noted here that when discussing ICC, we don't just mean people of different nationalities. Within cultures, there are differences. So we are really looking at micro and macro aspects of cultural diversity, so between cultures as well as within a culture. As ELT professionals, language is also obviously a necessary skill to support the development of intercultural competence and is used as a vehicle through which to understand and discuss other perspectives. So while there is an explicit focus on developing ICC skills, we also need to consider the integration of socio-linguistic and discourse competency, as well as vocabulary and language development.
So as Sandra has been discussing, all this research really points to the need for structure and organisation in a program for it to be truly effective. And if you remember that earlier quote from Havicon, which emphasised the fact that intercultural understanding is the product of intent and design, it doesn't just happen accidentally. So for us, this meant research into different types of models and various models for developing ICC or intercultural competency, which ended up with us creating our own model for ICC development and a curriculum framework which suited our context and our students. This structured approach that we took not only is founded in research, but it also had numerous benefits and it gives the program more strength. So when we're presenting this program to our teachers, to other management, as well as to the wider university community, we can show that it's backed by research and that there is a clear alignment to skills development as well as institution goals. So we have developed a framework, a curriculum framework, which we're going to share with you. And as part of developing this curriculum framework, we considered this model that you see on the screen in front of you, the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity, which was created by Bennett. Now, this model identifies that people move through 6 stages, generally move through 6 stages in their acquisition of intercultural competence. So they move from a monocultural worldview, which is at the start where that denial phase is, through to an integration of their own and other cultural worldviews that you can see on the other end of the scale, the integration phase. So let's just take a look at this model in a little bit more detail before we move on to the curriculum framework. So the first stage being denial. So an example of this is possibly stating my own culture is the only one that counts. My culture is the most evolved form of civilization. People tend to, according to Bennett, move through then to defence, another phase where the world is organised into us and them, where I consider my culture to be superior, or I consider it to be more evolved or the best way to live. And this phase also often includes negative stereotyping. Sometimes this changes to a reversal of thought, where it could be perceived that other cultures are better than mine, and my view of other cultures is generally made up of stereotypes. This then can change to minimisation. And this is a rather simplified view where all cultures and all people are considered to be essentially similar, but in a superficial way. So, for example, I'm sure all of you have seen that cultural iceberg, where some things are above the water and some things are below the water. So in this minimisation stage, people can see differences at that tip of the iceberg, so differences in foods and in festivals, but they consider people to be essentially similar in values and beliefs. So they're not yet able to conceptualise that difference below the surface of the iceberg. The next stage is acceptance, and this is where I accept that my culture views are not central or universally held. It's just one of a number of equally important worldviews. The next stage is adaptation, and this is the stage where I can adapt my behaviour and perceptions to be appropriate to a particular culture. And then finally, integration, and this is where my experience of self is really expanded to include movement in and out of different cultural worldviews. So I'm able to shift smoothly from one cultural worldview to another. Now, research has shown that this competence evolves over time from that relatively ethnocentric understanding, so that denial stage of other cultures, to a more comprehensive ethno-relative appreciation. And what we found, and I'm sure all of you are aware, that our students enter at different points and they may be at different levels of their intercultural competency development. So our aim is really to put them on the path and to give them the skills and the tools in order to be able to move forward to an integration of their own and other worldviews. Excuse me. So based on a wide range of literature on learning outcomes and intercultural competency models, just waiting for the next slide to pop up. And here it is. So we had a look at some literature, for example, Byram, going back all the way back to Bloom, Bennett, Lesk, Freeman, Oxfam, Deardorff, Howard, Hamilton. What we decided to do is create our own model for intercultural competency development, as well as a curriculum framework for our context. And in this model, we thought it very important that how learners acquire knowledge, skills and understanding is just as important as the actual acquisition of aspects of intercultural competence and socio-linguistic competence. So it's the process that's really important. So this model that you see on the screen in front of you identifies 4 parts to that circle. There are 3 domains, and there's also some desired outcomes. The desired outcomes are in that pie that's kind of sticking out. The 3 domains are knowledge and understanding, skills, and values and attitudes. We decided to make this circular because we really feel that no domain is predominant or sufficient, and students should be able to move between the domains. So it's not a linear process. And the desired outcomes may also be evident in different degrees. So there are internal outcomes, and these may not be visible, but they actually refer to an individual who, on reflection, feels that they've learnt to be, for example, empathetic, flexible, or feel that they have the ability to adapt to an ethno-relative perspective. And the external outcomes really refer to those visible changes in behaviour and communication styles. So there's that ongoing process of development and improvement, and really emphasising the role that lifelong learning has in the acquisition of intercultural competency skills, and the importance that self-evaluation and reflection play in this journey. Okay, so what we did now, this is a snapshot of our curriculum framework, and we took a look at those domains that I identified on the previous slide, and we identified key elements within these domains that are specifically relevant to our students and identified these within the curriculum framework. So I'd like to take a closer look at just one of the domains and some of the elements within there. And a really useful resource for us when we were developing this curriculum was Oxfam. Oxfam has a curriculum for global citizenship, and this also identified elements within the same domains, so knowledge and understanding, skills and values and attitudes. So the particular domain that we're looking at here on your screen is values and attitudes. And this domain includes ideas such as respecting and valuing other cultures, an openness and withholding of judgment, curiosity and tolerance towards ambiguity and uncertainty, as well as context-driven sociolinguistic and discourse awareness. What we did is identified specific elements. I'm just having some problems with our clicks here, so if you be patient. The elements are on the left-hand side there, and we also identified different levels of development as well as outcomes within each domain. So the elements that are on the left-hand side, they really relate to the ideas within each domain. So in this case, for example, element number 1 is a sense of identity and self-esteem. Element 2 is a respect for people. Element 3, value and respect for diversity. And element 4, a commitment to participation and inclusion. And then each level of development, so you can see across the top there are levels of development. So within each domain there are 3 levels of development. And they range from awareness raising to understanding through to facilitating learner autonomy. Each level of development has specific outcomes. So some of the outcomes in awareness raising are, you can see 1.1, awareness of and pride in own individuality, or 2.1, respect for other people's feelings and ideas. So when we design our tasks, we really try to ensure that each task within the curriculum provides support for each level of development. So each task will have an awareness raising activities, they'll have understanding activities, and they'll have autonomy activities. And so each task is aligned with these specific outcomes, and thus providing each student with a differentiated entry point to the task and identified skills development. This taxonomy also assists in designing and developing tasks, but it also helps us in monitor the progressive development of intercultural competency of our students. Now, I may just be having some problems moving on to the next slide. So, Sophie, if you could help me by moving on to the next slide, please.
Sure.
Thank you. One more. Thank you. Yep, that one. Can you go back one, Sophie? Sure. And back one more. Thank you. So this slide shows how that curriculum framework helps us in selecting and evaluating those fit-for-purpose activities. So what you see here is an example of how we evaluate and align each activity chosen with the domains. So for example, the activity that's circled, intercultural competency for global citizenship, aligns with elements 1, 2, 3 and 4 in the domain of values and attitudes, and it aligns with 1 and 2 in knowledge and understanding, and 1, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 in the skills domain. So each individual lesson plan for the tasks outline for the teachers which specific outcomes are being focused on at different points in the task. Sophie, if you don't mind just clicking for me one more time, please. Thank you. So this alignment of the activities and the outcomes have numerous benefits that we've seen. Not only does it formalise and give structure to the program, but it makes the program very organised, and it also makes it easier for the teachers to manage and understand as there is a clear rationale. It makes the program more transparent and meaningful, And also it highlights that idea of the program being fit for purpose, as we can be sure that the activities are meeting the specific aims. Moving on, thank you. So now we're just going to have a look at some practical ways. We've spoken a lot about what ICC skills are, some of the research behind it, and what we'd like to do now is just look at some practical ways to develop ICC skills with your students. So moving on, Sophie, please. So there are numerous ways to embed all of these skills into your teaching. You may already be developing these skills with your students and doing activities which you can identify with some of those outcomes we saw earlier. But our point is the need to make it explicit to the students. So really making sure that they know what skills that they're developing and how these relate to ICC development as a whole. So these are some ways that the development of these skills can be included in your teaching. Exploiting tasks within your own classroom, and we'll be looking at how some examples of how to do that a little bit later. You may want to work together with another class or another teacher, bringing together your classes to complete some activities. Another idea is embedding a program across your centre, and this is what we've done here at the University of Adelaide, and we'll be talking about this in more detail a little bit later on as well. Or there is also the option of working with external parties. So, for example, a TAFE group, a school group, other faculties within the university. If you have a relationship with other industry, bringing in external people or groups. An example of working with external parties, recently we have connected with the engineering department here at the University of Adelaide, and we're working together with lecturers there, embedding some of our tasks within their curriculum for domestic and international students in their first year engineering program to work on developing intercultural skills within engineering students. So moving on.
Okay, let's have a look at how we can exploit tasks that we may already be including in our teaching, and I'm sure you've done some of these activities before. So this could be done within your own class or together with another class, or as Paula suggested, with external groups. So there are different ways that you can exploit an activity. You could take a task like find someone who, and align it with the aims and objectives of ICC skills development. Or you could take a task that specifically focuses on intercultural competence and connect it with your curriculum by, for example, focusing on the language used. So let's take a look at examples of both. So what's the purpose of a find someone who? Generally used as an icebreaker. You might use it at the beginning of your program for reasons just to get students to get to know each other, or you to get to know their names, often on the first day of class. Or you might even be using it just to focus on or practice a language point. But as we've found, there's so much more. So if we focus on what ICC skills are actually being developed through an activity like this, we can see that it encourages intercultural interaction in the classroom. So far, we've looked at our curriculum framework, which Paula went through, and it identifies the 3 domains and elements and outcomes within those domains. So looking at this Find Someone Who activity through that lens, we can see the outcomes of this activity within an ICC program. So they could be awareness of links with other places, e.g. through food, to break down barriers, develop deeper and more personal understanding of diversity, to compare similarities and differences between places in various parts of the world, including their own, to acknowledge that everyone should be included and able to participate, to help students interact with each other as individuals, initially not just focusing on cultural backgrounds, listening to others, looking at different viewpoints, participating in group activities with an awareness of inclusivity, as well as the socio-linguistic and discourse elements of developing appropriate context-specific language related to introductions and conversation cues. So this is just an example of how a task can be exploited, but the difference here is that you're making explicit the skills that are being developed. Therefore, it's important to make the students aware that they are, in fact, developing a range of ICC skills in this simple task. So this can be done before and or after the lesson or at both stages. But it also serves to help the students reflect on what has happened in the activity and their own values and beliefs. So reflection is a key tool in the development of ICC skills. It is this explicitness of aims and reflection that takes this from being a simple getting to know you task to a task that specifically develops ICC skills. Here's an example of how you could take a task that specifically focuses on intercultural competence and connect it with your curriculum that you're already involved with. So, for example, you might be focusing on a particular language point, but we're going to integrate how you're connecting the development of intercultural competence. So take a moment to think about what the aims of this activity are. The aim of the activity is to give learners the opportunity to analyse critical incidents related to possible cultural misunderstandings and reflect on how they can apply certain skills in their personal lives. So students are asked to use questions to interpret or analyse incidents such as the one you're seeing now on your screen. But there are specific ICC skills development outcomes in this task. For example, to deepen understanding and interaction with different cultures, to compare similarities and differences between places in various parts of the world, including their own setting, to construct creative and positive outcomes of conflict, to show sensitivity to diverse perspectives and cultural norms when managing conflict, and to integrate new or revised perspectives into their own learning and thinking and actions. This task could also be integrated into your curriculum for language development. For example, you might want to review or aim to review and learn past tenses for describing events, to review or learn question forms, review or learn vocab related to confusion or annoyance, and review and learn language related to giving suggestions, and even to refine paraphrasing skills. So these are just a sample of different sort of activities that we use within our program. And you'll notice that, I'm sure, if you're looking at them, that you've probably incorporated many of these into your own teaching. But it's the alignment of these activities to the aims and objectives of the explicit ICC skills development that is essential. So it's taking it that one step further from just a fun activity or language activity at the end of a class, or when you've come to the end of what you're doing with your curriculum, as we saw with the Find Someone Who activity, and making it more meaningful in terms of ICC skill development. So we've looked at how we can exploit tasks within our teaching. Now let's look at how we have embedded an ICC program within our centre, the English Language Centre at the University of Adelaide. While global citizenship is identified as essential for our 21st century ELICOS learners, and it's embedded in our institution's strategic goals and graduate attributes, we discovered it was not identified in any of our English Language Centre program objectives or learning outcomes. Historically at our centre, we've had cross-class activities which have tried to fulfil these objectives. However, they focus mainly on general communication and were not part of the formal curriculum or aligned to any program objectives. So these activities were also often omitted by teachers due to busy teaching schedules and misunderstandings of how they could actually assist students in developing intercultural competency. So to bridge this gap, a few years ago, we began to develop an organised intentional program based on all the research we've talked about, with a formal curriculum and rationale, with an explicit focus on developing ICC skills towards becoming global citizens, while integrating other core macro skill development as well as vocabulary and language work. So to connect with the university strategic goals and graduate attributes, in 2015, our centre decided to prioritise ICC skills development and created a standalone program that is now embedded across all programs at the University of Adelaide's ELC, as well as included in objectives in all our programs. The program runs over 20 weeks with a common task taking place every 5-week teaching cycle. This task is distributed to teachers and involves all our students, regardless of language level. As I've said, they can be high level or low level students. They still can be timetabled together. They work together with the aim of developing ICC skills. We organise a timetable for classes to meet and participate in the activities. The program is then designed to be easily implemented and transferable to academic or non-academic groups, and it's not reliant on the cultures within the groups. Connecting it with the research discussed earlier, it is an organised, intentional program providing structured opportunities to develop ICC skills through the different stages of ICC acquisition. Currently, we've developed 12 independent lesson plans, including materials designed to be delivered over a 90-minute period, 60 to 90 minutes. Each lesson plan has its own self-considered value, and it's not dependent on what has gone before or after. This means over a 20-week period, our students will generally complete 4 of these lessons, giving them a rich and deep experience immersed in situations which encourage them to think more deeply and learn to appreciate and understand cultural diversity. So it's anticipated that at the conclusion of the program, students will feel this experience has contributed to the development of ICC skills for global citizenship.
So this is an example of one of the lesson plans that Sandra was talking about. Now, these lesson plans have been developed to provide that alignment that we're talking about and really clearly align the activities with the curriculum and the specific outcomes, both in relation to ICC skills development as well as language skills development. So you can see there in the lesson plan there are some specific ICC aims as well as some language skills development aims. And they seem to be quite a lot, but teachers would pick and choose which ones are more relevant to their class. Now, this lesson plan is actually for the activity that you saw earlier, the critical incidents activity that we had a look at. So for each task, we also send through to the teachers the rationale for the actual program and how the task is connected to the curriculum, as well as a lesson plan like this, which includes the purpose and aim of the activities, as well as a suggested procedure. Now, this procedure highlights how each activity within the task reflects the different stages of learning that we outlined in the curriculum. So in this part, you can see there are some awareness activities, and then there are some activities for developing understanding. And then moving on to the second part of the lesson plan, you can see it continues with facilitating learner autonomy and some activities which go towards that. These lesson plans also provide some identification and suggestions for any scaffolding that may be needed to develop the language and skills that are required for the task. We also give some additional resources and extension activities that teachers may decide to take up. And what we've found is that teachers often use this lesson plan as a starting point, and many teachers are actually integrating the task and language development to work that they're currently delivering in their classrooms. And they're doing this either before the task or after the task, or both. Some examples of this are, in particular, our lower level classes will work on vocabulary and language surrounding the task. So this assists those students in addressing the language outcomes, but it also, more importantly, provides those students with the confidence to participate actively in these tasks with classes that may be of higher ability. So as you remember, Sandra said, we mix our classes up regardless of ability. Other teachers exploit the activity and the topic for work that they might do after the task. Some examples of this include essay writing in our academic English classes, debates, oral presentations, or it's used as topics for reflective blogs or journals. And this supports what we discussed earlier about exploiting tasks and how they can be connected to the curriculum. So we've looked at what we do, but as with any program, it's really important to also consider the success or limitations of the program from the participant's view. So we collect data from teacher and student evaluations and reflections. So this information isn't collected after each task, but at planned specific points within the program. And it really enables continual improvement and allows for any kind of adjustment or modification of the program content. And it also provides us with an opportunity to capture the student voice and get a deeper understanding of their experience. This, on your screens now, you'll see is an example of our student reflection sheet. And you can see we asked students whether they enjoyed the activity or not, question 1. But we also want to know why they enjoyed it. And we'll take a look at some of those open-ended responses later. We also focus on what parts were challenging and what parts were their favourite parts. And then section 5 also asks students to specifically reflect on skills that they've developed. As teachers are starting to use this language with the students are becoming more familiar with it, because you can see that some of the language in question 5 is quite specific to ICC skills development and may be quite challenging for some of the students. But we're starting to develop kind of a community between teachers and students at our centre where the terminology is becoming more common and there's starting to be a shared understanding of what this means. So this is some data that we pulled from one of our reflections that we did, and I think there was about 354 student respondents for this. So you can see that they really enjoyed the activity, with over half the respondents at that upper end of the scale, and that's great. But there's more to these activities than just enjoyment. So although it's a lot of fun, and when we go into classrooms that are conducting these activities, we can see that students are participating well and that they're interacting and that they're really enjoying themselves. But we want to know whether it's actually hitting the aims and objectives of the program. So we did some further analysis of those open-ended questions based on their opinion on the importance of the program or of the activity. And we found that 2 main themes came out. The opportunity to practice listening and speaking skills was considered by students to be very important, as well as the middle one, which was speaking with people of different and cultural backgrounds. And here you can see some of the responses from the students, and you can see that those responses are aligned with our aims. So the students were identifying that this activity increased interaction between cultures. It allowed them to understand different thinking or different cultures. It increased their knowledge of another country. It gave them the opportunity to exchange experiences, as well as the bottom one, which you might not be able to see, which was understanding different accents. And this was very useful for us because it really reinforced our objectives and demonstrated that students not only enjoyed the program, but that they valued the program as well. Now, these student reflections also gave us some very interesting information on how to improve the program. So, for example, when asked what they found to be most difficult, the most difficult aspect of the tasks, about 28% of the students identified, you can't see the values there on the slide, but about 28% identified lack of vocabulary as being an issue, and about 31% identified challenges surrounding accents and pronunciation. So taking that student feedback on board, we saw this as a positive, and what it's done is allowed us to further develop our tasks and the program to suit the students' needs, and we integrated additional scaffolding into the lesson plans and resources to try to address this need. And what you see on your screen now is one of our teacher reflection sheets. It's fairly similar to the student reflection sheet. Now, initial teacher feedback indicated that there were some challenges adding the tasks to an already packed curriculum. The teachers are doing so much with the students. Initially, it was thought, how can I do some extra tasks and get them to work on additional skills? However, with the formalisation of the program, there also came a really positive aspect of our centre rewriting the objectives of all programs here at the ELC, from the university pathway programs through to the study tours. The objectives now include the development of intercultural competency as one of the core aspects. So they've been embedded into the objectives of the programs. There is also a clear rationale and a curriculum framework for teachers to follow. And the lesson plans are easily accessible and prepared, and the resources are all prepared for the teachers. And teacher feedback has now indicated that it's become a welcome part of the culture of the organisation. And teachers who teach on our programs have also communicated to us that the program has formed part of their continual professional development, as it's encouraged them to think more explicitly about why they do things in the classroom, and also how to improve the quality of their teaching and the students' learning.
Now, up on the screen is something that's pretty hot off the press for us, but we wanted to gain a greater understanding of the skills that students perceive they have developed, and if they feel that there's actually been a shift in their ICC skills development over the program. So just recently we've developed this retrospective post then pre-design tool to assess students' self-reported perceptions of their development of ICC skills. So we plan now to use this at the end of each program. So it's a self-evaluation. We'll be distributing it to the students, and they'll be asked to rate their perceptions of their development of ICC skills twice. Now, as a result of the program, so they can reflect, when they're finishing, and then reflect back on the same aspects of where they felt they were before participating in the program. Now, we've chosen this design tool, and with this one for assessing where they are, because asking students to reflect on both of these aspects at the same time means that they may have a better understanding of how the program content has assisted in the development of their ICC skills. It's less intrusive, this type of assessment, and avoids pre-test sensitivity and bias that may occur due to the students over or underestimating their skills, so at the beginning of the program. We don't have any data collected from using this instrument at the moment because, as I said, we're going to use it for the first time on the courses that are currently running, which finish sometime in July. But we hope that this will be able to give us more information on whether the students feel that they are developing their ICC skills, or at least moved through any of the stages of their own intercultural competence. So we're trying this as an alternative to any sort of formal assessment tool, as we feel self-evaluation is key. Why it's important for teachers? Well, this presentation has really focused on what ICC skills are, why they're important, and ways we can develop these skills with our students. But we'd like to finish by also reflecting on why it's important for us as teachers. As part of our continual professional development as teachers, looking at how to better our practices and improve the quality of teaching and learning is essential. So if we consider the good practice principles for learning and teaching across cultures, and you're probably doing a lot of these things at the moment in your classroom, these principles also serve to help us as teachers to review our current practice and reflect on how we could make improvements according to our own specific context. This may simply mean considering why we do things more explicitly and a deeper reflection of our own teaching and of the students' learning. So while these principles focus on good teaching across cultures, they can also be related to the micro or macro aspects of cultural diversity between cultures as well as within a culture.
So our ICC program, Intercultural Competency program, tries to prepare our students to leave our centre with an education that has supported not only the students' language and skills development, but their development as global citizens. And hopefully we've been able to impart that to you. We are quite passionate about it, and so welcome any comments or questions. And if you'd like to contact us, our emails are up there on the screen. So any questions, Sophie?
Okay, if anyone has any questions, then you can type them into the chat box now. Okay, the first one to come through is a comment which said, inspiring, very practical and covers all aspects of the development of the program.
Thank you very much. I was going to say there's a couple more slides of references, so if people wanted our references, they're on the next 2 slides.
Mm-hmm.
We've been too thorough.
You have. I guess I just had a question about the mixed level groups and how the students react to the mixed level groups, you know, whether the lower students feel shy or the higher students get frustrated. How does it work?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And of course, I mean, and not only teachers were like, when we first did it, thought, no, I've got the sort of beginner students and you're putting me together with the academic pathway students. So I think we mentioned through the presentation, one of the strategies that we've suggested to the teachers, and I think the teacher actually came up with it herself, we've embedded the language teaching, but also what they will do is perhaps rehearse or prepare. They'll cover the language in class before the timetabled event. If it's a conversation or where there's a group discussion, they'll actually practice it with themselves. So they've actually had a chance to practice the language or even practice the activity, if need be, before they come together with the other class. So we've had no negative response actually from students or teachers, if you know, when they're following that. It's been really, really successful.
Yeah, and for the lower level classes, it's actually quite a sense of accomplishment. So initially there were the nerves with the lower levels that they were going to be meeting the high level classes, but once they do the activity and do it successfully, it gives them quite a sense of accomplishment that they're able to, in fact, communicate regardless of their language level.
All right, thank you. Okay, no other questions have come through. I think, yes, you've covered everything so well. There is one that's just popped through now. So thanks, Paula and Sandra, very useful and practical. Not sure if I've missed this, but how long are the sessions?
Yeah, we suggest 60 to 90 minutes. That's how we've made the lesson plan. We prefer the more than 90-minute because we feel that it gives, you know, you don't have to stop the interaction that's going on or the discussion. You know, if students are really getting into it, if you allow some time for that to continue. So yeah, generally 60 to 90 minutes, once every 5 weeks. So it's not, we're not trying to make it too onerous on teachers that they have to give up too much time for the curriculum they've got to cover. So once every 5 weeks, 60 to 90 minutes.
Great. Another question. ICC skills are perhaps even more important for domestic students who may not have been overseas. Do you have any plans to extend this to them?
Yeah, and that's absolutely right. Even for students who have been overseas, domestic students that have been overseas, they may not necessarily be developing these skills just through their experience of being overseas. What we are doing at the moment is trialling the program with the Department of Engineering, the School of Engineering here at the University of Adelaide, with a class that's largely made up of local students with only a few international students, and our activities are being embedded into the workshops, adapted slightly to suit those students who don't need as much language input, and the self-evaluation tasks have been adapted slightly as well for that context. and hopefully data will be coming through and we'll be able to see how that's gone at the end of semester 1. So throughout semester 1, I think we have about 3 or 4 of our activities that are being used with that particular class.
Wonderful. How did that come about, that collaboration?
That because we have a relationship with someone within the engineering department who's also got a TESOL background, so has this understanding as well. And that was sort of because they were keen and motivated and enthusiastic, that's how that came about.
Yeah.
But we've also found that we've had contact from people in the wider university who they're trying to get up some program for domestic students to do. I think it's an online course, so they can, it's because we said we align it with the strategic goals and the graduate attributes. So there are some courses that need students to do this extra work, and they can do it and it can go on their transcript that they've done this program. So we found that we've been contacted by people from the university to sort of give some input.
That's fantastic, because I guess that sort of thing also helps to raise the profile of the English Language Centre within the university and as well.
Yeah, and I think it was going back to that, you know, the strengths of a program that's structured like this. I think it was the alignment to what we're doing here with this program and to the university strategic goals or their aims of internalisation, and making that alignment really explicit helps us cement these relationships with the wider university community and take it out of the English Language Centre.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. There are no other questions at the moment, so we might finish up there. Someone's just said that it'd be interesting to see the results of the collaboration with the engineering faculty and hear more about the online course. They've given you a little prompt, EA 2017 or 2018 perhaps, or another webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for listening.
Yeah, so I'd just like to again thank Sandra and Paula on behalf of English Australia for sharing all of that detail about your program with us. It's always really helpful to hear practical examples of things that are already up and running, but also with the wisdom of all that, the theoretical underpinnings that you have behind you. So thank you so much for sharing that with our members. And also it was very interesting that you tied the webinar into the theme of the English Australia conference this year, Empowering Global Citizens, because I think you're right, there is a really close connection between what you're doing and the theme of the conference. So thank you to our presenters and thank you to our audience for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.